young couple, recently married and still adjusting to their new lives together, suddenly found themselves facing an unimaginable challenge: raising a paralyzed child. It was a role they never anticipated, and every day they wondered if they were truly prepared for such a responsibility. But one quiet afternoon, as their 5-month-old baby slept peacefully, their puppy, Charlie, performed an act so extraordinary it left them in awe. An act they would later call a miracle. The soft chime of the doorbell broke the stillness of their afternoon. At first, Tom barely registered the sound, engrossed in his work. A software developer, he was deep into coding, his focus unwavering. In another room, his wife, Grace, had just returned home after a long and exhausting shift at the hospital. As a dedicated nurse, she cherished moments of peace in their cozy home on Maple Street, a sanctuary they were slowly building together. But the persistent ringing grew louder and more insistent, pulling Tom out of his concentrated trance. With a reluctant sigh, he pushed back his chair and shuffled toward the door, wondering who could be interrupting their quiet day. When Tom opened the door, the scene that greeted him was like something out of a drama he couldn't have written. A young woman stood there, her clothes disheveled, her face pale, and her arms clutching a small, swaddled baby as if her very life depended on it. Her wide, tear-streaked eyes locked onto his, filled with desperation and urgency. Tom blinked, momentarily frozen by the intensity of her presence. He didn't recognize her. She was a complete stranger. Yet, her haggard appearance told a story of exhaustion and fear, as if she had been running on nothing but adrenaline for days. I don't know what to do," she stammered, her voice cracking as tears began streaming down her cheeks. "Please, I need your help." Tom stood speechless, his mind racing to comprehend the situation. He wanted to ask her who she was, where she had come from, and why she was at their door, but the anguish in her voice stopped him cold. Something inside him stirred, a mix of sympathy and dread. Whatever brought her here, it was clear. Their lives were about to change in ways they could never have anticipated. I can't take care of him anymore," the woman said, her voice trembling as fresh tears streamed down her face. "He's yours now." Tom froze, struggling to comprehend the weight of her words. His mind tried to process the surreal moment unfolding before him, but it all happened too fast. The baby, bundled tightly in a faded blue blanket, let out a soft coo, oblivious to the chaos around him. Before Tom could respond, the woman stepped forward, placing the baby gently into his arms. Her hands lingered for a brief second, trembling as though she were making the hardest decision of her life. Then, without warning, she handed Tom a crumpled letter and turned to leave. "Wait. What?" Tom stammered, his voice catching as he instinctively held the baby closer. But the woman didn't stop. She was already halfway down the walkway, her pace quick and determined, as though she feared she might change her mind if she lingered a second longer. "Wait," Tom called after her, louder this time, his voice filled with urgency. But it was no use. By the time he thought to step forward, she had rounded the corner of the street, vanishing as if she had never been there at all. Tom's thoughts raced as he stood frozen on the doorstep, his arms cradling the tiny infant. The crumpled letter she had thrust at him felt heavier than it should, as though it carried the weight of her sorrow and secrets. He glanced down at the baby, who had drifted back to sleep, his soft breathing a stark contrast to the chaos erupting in Tom's chest. Moments later, Grace appeared at the door, her face flushed from fatigue but quickly morphing into wide-eyed disbelief as she took in the scene. Her husband, her logical, dependable husband, stood on their porch with a baby in his arms and a look of sheer panic etched across his face. "Tom, what is this? Who is this?" she asked, her voice a mix of shock and confusion. Tom hesitated, opening his mouth to explain but faltering as he realized how absurd the situation must have looked. Grace's mind raced, jumping to wild conclusions. For a fleeting second, her thoughts darted to something unthinkable. Had Tom cheated on her? Was this his child? But as quickly as the suspicion arose, it disappeared. She knew Tom better than that. She trusted him implicitly. Whatever this was, there had to be an explanation. I don't know," Tom admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "She just left him here." Grace's breath caught as she stepped closer, her gaze softening as she took in the tiny baby nestled in the blanket. Her instincts as a nurse, as a caretaker, and as someone with an open heart took over. She knew in that moment, no matter how this happened, their lives had changed forever. Without saying a word, Tom extended the crumpled letter to Grace. She hesitated for only a moment before taking it, and together they began to read. Line by line, their expressions grew more somber, the weight of the woman's words settling heavily in the air around them. The letter revealed a heartbreaking truth. The young woman, unable to care for her baby any longer, had sought out the Millers because she believed they could provide him with the love and care she could not. She had chosen Grace specifically, knowing she was a nurse, someone who would understand the baby's needs and give him the attention he required. The woman explained that her son, now 3 months old, had been born paralyzed from the waist down. Abandoned by the baby's father upon learning of the disability, she had been left to navigate the overwhelming challenges alone. She described how, despite it being no fault of her own, friends and family had distanced themselves, treating her as though she were to blame for her child's condition. Exhausted and broken, she admitted that she had reached her limit. She needed time to care for herself, time she could no longer find while trying to meet her baby's demanding needs. Through her tears, she wrote of her guilt and sorrow, but expressed hope that Tom and Grace would give her child the love and stability she could not. She ended the letter by explaining her decision. She had recognized Grace at the hospital during her delivery, remembering the kindness she had shown her as a nurse. That moment of compassion had stayed with her, guiding her to this difficult choice. Enclosed with the letter was a legal document granting the Millers custody of the child. However, one crucial piece was missing: a birth certificate. The woman had left no identifying details, leaving Tom and Grace with no way to know her name or where she had gone. Tom and Grace exchanged wide-eyed glances, rereading the letter as though the words might change with a second look. But there it was, in black and white. Their lives had changed irrevocably. This baby was now their responsibility. Grace was the first to break the silence. She looked down at the sleeping child, her heart softening as she took in his delicate features and peaceful expression. All at once, her nurturing instincts as a nurse and her compassion as a person surged forward. "We can't turn our backs on him," she said softly, her voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions she felt. "This is where he's meant to be." Tom nodded, the gravity of the situation still sinking in. Though his mind swirled with questions and doubts, one thing was clear: they couldn't walk away from this. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. Grace gently cradled the baby in her arms, soothing him with soft whispers as she carried him inside. Though still shaken by the whirlwind of events, she and Tom instinctively knew what they had to do. They couldn't let this child suffer. It didn't matter that they weren't prepared. They would rise to the occasion. This tiny boy, abandoned and vulnerable, needed them more than anyone ever had. Though unplanned, he felt like a blessing, and in that moment, they made a silent vow to give him the love and care he deserved. Over the weeks that followed, the Millers began to adjust to their new roles as parents. They decided to name the baby Oliver, a name they both agreed felt right for their unexpected son. It wasn't easy at first. The sleepless nights, constant diaper changes, and endless doctor visits to assess his condition became their new normal. Grace, ever the nurturer, took a few weeks off work to focus on Oliver's needs. Luckily, the hospital was understanding, granting her maternity leave without hesitation. With Grace's experience as a nurse and Tom's steadfast support, they managed to navigate the challenges together. During one particularly emotional visit to the pediatric specialist, the couple finally received a glimmer of hope. Although Oliver's paralysis was permanent, his condition wouldn't prevent him from living a full, meaningful life. The doctor explained that with proper care, therapy, and adaptive support, Oliver could grow up to be independent, happy, and thriving. Relief washed over the couple like a warm tide. It wasn't going to be easy, but knowing that Oliver could have a bright future filled them with renewed determination. They tackled each new challenge head-on, finding joy in the small victories and milestones. After settling into their new routine, Tom and Grace sought legal advice. They reached out to their attorney to determine the best course of action for Oliver's adoption. It took a few days, But the attorney returned with good news. The signed agreement from the birth mother gave them a strong legal standing. Since efforts to locate her had failed, they could formally adopt Oliver without the risk of anyone contesting it. The decision was clear. Grace, with her boundless empathy, agreed wholeheartedly. She felt a pang of sadness for the young mother and hoped that one day she might return to reunite with her son. But for now, life had to move forward, and Oliver was theirs in every sense of the word. Just as the Millers began to find their rhythm as a family, life threw another surprise their way. A miracle wrapped in scruffy fur. One crisp morning, as the sun peeked through the trees in their backyard, Grace spotted movement near the fence. Curious, she stepped outside and found a small, trembling puppy huddled in the corner. Its fur was matted, its ribs visible beneath the scruffy coat. The little dog looked up at her with wide, fearful eyes, its body shivering from the cold. Without a moment's hesitation, Grace knelt down and scooped the puppy into her arms. It nuzzled against her chest, its trembling slowing as it found warmth and comfort in her embrace. "Looks like we've got another unexpected guest," she whispered with a soft smile, carrying the puppy inside. Tom glanced up from his desk as Grace entered the kitchen, the tiny pup cradled in her arms. "Grace," he said, shaking his head with a mix of amusement and affection, "you can't resist saving strays, can you?" Grace shrugged, her eyes shining with determination. "This little guy needs us, Tom, just like Oliver did." Tom smiled, leaning over to scratch the puppy's head. "Well," he said, "I guess we'd better make room for one more." And so the Millers' home grew a little fuller, their hearts expanding to welcome another soul in need. Little did they know, this scruffy puppy would play a role in a miracle they never could have imagined. At first, Tom was hesitant about keeping the puppy. The added responsibility weighed heavily on his mind, especially with Oliver already requiring so much care. But Grace's unwavering determination and compassion eventually won him over. Reluctantly, he agreed, and the couple took the puppy to the vet for a checkup. The veterinarian confirmed that the puppy, whom they decided to name Charlie, was indeed a stray. He had no collar or identification, and aside from a minor illness, he was in good health. However, it was clear that Charlie had a troubled past. The little dog seemed deeply wary of people, as though he had learned not to trust them. Charlie adored Grace, following her around the house like a shadow. But his behavior around others was more concerning. He displayed open animosity toward Tom, growling and snapping whenever he got too close. The situation grew even more complicated when Charlie seemed restless and uneasy whenever Grace was with Oliver. His behavior made Tom uneasy. Was Charlie jealous of the attention Grace gave the baby? Tom, concerned for Oliver's safety, began to question whether keeping Charlie was the right decision. "What if he hurts Oliver, Grace?" "I don't think we can take that risk," he said one evening, his voice edged with worry. But Grace was determined. "He just needs time, Tom. He's scared, that's all. We can't give up on him so easily," she replied gently but firmly. A few days later, Tom decided to take matters into his own hands. Early one morning, he took Charlie out for a long walk, hoping it might help them bond. At first, the puppy seemed indifferent, sniffing around and keeping his distance. But as the walk continued, something shifted. Charlie began to relax, glancing up at Tom with what seemed like curiosity. By the time they returned home, the little dog was wagging his tail and looking at Tom with newfound trust. This small breakthrough gave the couple hope. If Charlie could warm up to Tom, perhaps in time, he would bond with Oliver as well. They decided to give him the time and space he needed to adjust. Life became a whirlwind of activity. Grace juggled her demanding shifts at the hospital with late-night feedings and diaper changes, while Tom adjusted his work schedule to handle more of the household responsibilities. Their days were a delicate balancing act between caring for Oliver and giving Charlie the attention he so desperately craved. Charlie, still a puppy, was particularly needy. He demanded constant love and reassurance, something he had likely never known before. Meanwhile, Oliver required extra care to ensure he received enough exercise for his lower limbs to remain healthy. The couple's families tried to help when they could, but their busy schedules often meant Tom and Grace were on their own. Whenever visitors came to the house, Charlie's protective instincts kicked into high gear. He barked furiously at anyone who stepped through the door, making it clear that his new family was under his watchful protection. Though his behavior could be exhausting, it also warmed their hearts. Charlie might have been small, but his loyalty and fierce devotion were undeniable. Amid the chaos of their new life, moments of joy shone through. Oliver's contagious laughter and Charlie's playful antics filled the house with love and warmth. Even in the most hectic moments, the Millers found themselves smiling, grateful for the little family they were building. But just as they began to find their rhythm, a new challenge arose. One evening, after an especially grueling day, Grace noticed that Oliver felt warm to the touch. Her heart sank as she realized he had developed a fever. "Tom," she called, panic creeping into her voice. "Oliver's burning up." Tom rushed into the room, his own worry mirrored in Grace's eyes. The joyful energy that had filled their home just hours before now gave way to fear. Once again, they were reminded that their journey as parents and as a family would be filled with unexpected trials. When Oliver's fever didn't subside after a few hours, panic set in. Grace and Tom wasted no time rushing him to the hospital, their hearts pounding with fear. The waiting felt endless as doctors performed tests, but amidst the uncertainty, a glimmer of hope emerged. After what felt like an eternity, the doctor finally stepped into the waiting room. His expression was calm but serious, and Tom and Grace clung to each other as they braced for news. "Thank you for your patience," the doctor began. "We've discovered something unusual about Oliver's condition." Before we continue with the story, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support means the world to us and helps us bring more stories like this to you. Thank you. The doctor went on to explain that Oliver had a rare condition that temporarily paralyzed his legs. It wasn't permanent, and there was a chance he could regain movement. The words hit Tom and Grace like a bolt of lightning, but this time it wasn't fear or sadness. It was joy. "Are you serious?" Grace asked, her voice trembling with disbelief. The doctor nodded. "I can't tell you exactly when he'll regain movement, but with the right care and therapy, there's a strong possibility. Stay positive and hopeful." It was a miracle. For so long, they had accepted Oliver's paralysis as a permanent reality. Now, the possibility of him walking filled them with hope and renewed determination. The doctor praised the couple for their dedication and the exceptional care they'd already been providing for Oliver. "You've been doing an incredible job," he said, smiling warmly. "Just keep it up, and we'll check on his progress in 2 months." Leaving the hospital that night, Grace and Tom felt lighter than they had in months. Though they knew the road ahead would still be challenging, the thought of Oliver one day taking his first steps gave them strength. Back at home, life revolved around Oliver's care. Grace and Tom alternated their schedules to make sure someone was always with him, watching over him with unwavering devotion. Each day was filled with therapy exercises, diaper changes, and endless prayers for progress. Despite their exhaustion, they held on to hope. Charlie, sensing the tension and worry in the house, seemed to grow even closer to Oliver. The little puppy, once restless and distrustful, had become the baby's shadow, rarely leaving his side. His constant companionship brought comfort to the entire family. One evening, after an especially long day, Tom collapsed onto the couch, utterly drained. Grace had gone out to run errands, leaving him to watch over Oliver. The baby monitor sat on the coffee table, emitting the soft, static hum of Oliver's room. Charlie lay at Tom's feet, his ears twitching at every small sound, his protective instincts as sharp as ever. It was as if Charlie understood the gravity of Oliver's condition. He seemed to know that the baby needed extra care, and he had taken it upon himself to become Oliver's guardian. Suddenly, a faint thud broke the quiet of the evening. Charlie's ears shot up, and his body tensed. Something wasn't right. Without hesitation, he leapt to his feet and bolted toward Oliver's room, his small paws padding urgently down the hallway. The monitor crackled as Charlie's bark echoed faintly through the speaker. Tom startled awake, his heart racing as he followed Charlie. What he found in Oliver's room would change everything. Somehow, while asleep, Oliver had slipped through the vertical slats of his crib. His tiny body dangled precariously over the edge, his head pressed awkwardly against the floor. It was a terrifying sight. His head and neck bore the weight of his body, and his paralyzed lower limbs left him unable to push himself back to safety. Every passing second increased the danger. One small shift, one wrong movement, and he could fall completely, the angle of the fall likely fatal. Charlie, sensing the urgency of the moment, sprang into action. The little puppy nudged closer to Oliver, his small body trembling with determination. He used his nose to gently push Oliver upward, trying to guide him back onto the mattress. His paws braced against the crib as he carefully shielded the baby from further harm. In the living room, Tom stirred awake to the sound of Charlie's distressed whines. The noise tugged at his instincts, and he bolted upright, adrenaline coursing through him as he rushed toward the nursery. When he entered, the sight before him stopped him in his tracks. Charlie, small but fearless, was making one final push to nudge Oliver's body back into the crib. Tom watched, frozen in awe, as the puppy managed to shift Oliver's tiny frame back to safety. The moment Oliver was secure, Tom rushed to his son's side, his heart pounding in his chest. Charlie stood protectively next to the crib, his tail wagging slightly as if to say, "He's okay now." Tom's hands trembled as he scooped Oliver up and checked him over. The baby was unharmed, his tiny fingers clutching tightly to Charlie's fur, as if he, too, understood what the puppy had done. Tears welled up in Tom's eyes as he looked down at the two of them, a baby and a puppy, connected by a bond that had saved a life. Grace returned home shortly after, her arms full of groceries. She found Tom in the nursery, cradling Oliver in his arms. Charlie lay curled up at his feet, his little body finally at rest after the night's ordeal. "What happened?" Grace asked softly, taking in the scene. Tom recounted the story, his voice breaking with emotion as he described Charlie's heroic act. Grace knelt beside them, her own eyes filling with tears as she stroked Charlie's fur. "You're our little hero," she whispered to the puppy, her voice full of gratitude. That night, the Millers stayed together in the nursery. Grace held Oliver, Tom rested beside her, and Charlie lay at their feet, never straying far from the family he had come to love so fiercely. Despite all the challenges they faced, one thing was clear. They had each other. And that was enough. As the days turned into weeks, Oliver's condition began to improve. The paralysis that had once seemed so permanent slowly started to recede. Bit by bit, he regained movement in his legs. The first time Oliver kicked his little feet, Grace and Tom wept with joy. It was a miracle, and they knew it. Life began to settle into a rhythm. The long nights and endless worries gave way to moments of laughter and light. Grace and Tom found their balance, managing work, parenting, and caring for Charlie as a team. Oliver continued to grow stronger, his giggles and playful smiles filling their home with warmth. And through it all, Charlie remained by his side, a steadfast companion and protector. One sunny afternoon, the family decided to take a break from their busy routine and enjoy the beautiful weather. They spread a blanket in the backyard and packed a picnic. Oliver, now sitting up and babbling happily, reached for Charlie, who wagged his tail and licked the baby's tiny fingers. Grace leaned into Tom's shoulder, watching as their son and puppy played together. "We've come a long way," Tom said, his voice soft but full of emotion. Grace nodded, her heart swelling with gratitude. "We have. And we've got everything we need right here." As the sun bathed the little family in golden light, it was clear that their journey, though far from over, had brought them closer than ever. They were stronger together, and with love, hope, and the occasional miracle, they knew they could face anything that came their way. Oliver, now a lively toddler, ran across the lawn, his giggles ringing through the air as he chased Charlie in a game of tag. The little dog darted around playfully, occasionally pausing to let Oliver catch up before bounding off again. Grace and Tom sat on the porch, watching the scene unfold with contented smiles. Their hearts were full, overflowing with gratitude for the journey that had brought them to this moment. It was hard to believe how far they had come. The trials they had faced together had only strengthened their bond, turning them into a family in every sense of the word. What had once seemed like an overwhelming challenge now felt like the greatest blessing of their lives. But just as they were settling into their happiness, life had one more surprise in store. A few days later, the doorbell rang. Charlie, ever the alert guardian, bolted toward the door, barking excitedly. Oliver toddled after him, his little feet padding noisily across the floor. Tom, who was closest, opened the door with a smile, one that quickly faded as he took in the sight of the person standing on the porch. His face turned pale, and his heart skipped a beat. It was Oliver's birth mother. "Grace," he called out, his voice tight with emotion. Grace appeared in the hallway, her breath catching as she saw the woman standing outside. She didn't need to ask who it was. She knew immediately. Tears welled in her eyes as she stared at the woman, her mind racing with fear. Was she here to take Oliver back? Despite her panic, Grace stepped forward and opened the door wider, silently inviting the woman and the man with her to step inside. But to their surprise, the woman didn't move. Instead, she held out a stack of papers to Tom, her expression unreadable. Tucked neatly on top was a letter. Tom and Grace exchanged a wary glance before Tom took the papers. The woman, who introduced herself as Carla, hesitated for a moment as though she wanted to say more. But then, with a small nod, she turned and walked away, her partner following close behind. Inside, the couple read the letter, their emotions swirling with every word. Carla explained that she had sought the help she needed and was now in a much better place. She apologized once more for her past actions, acknowledging the pain she must have caused them. She wrote that she had found love again and was getting married. She wanted to close this chapter of her life, leaving them to decide if and when to tell Oliver about her. "I will never contest your custody," the letter read. "Oliver is where he belongs, with the family who loves him." While Carla's words brought some relief, they also carried a tinge of sadness. Grace couldn't help but feel that Carla's decision, though necessary for her healing, had been shaped by the trauma she endured. Yet, Grace chose not to judge her. Instead, she found herself wishing Carla peace, even as she tucked the letter and papers away. A soft smile crossed Grace's face as she looked at Tom and Oliver, who was now sitting on the floor, playing with Charlie. Her heart was full of gratitude for the life they had built and the miracles they had experienced. And there was one more miracle she was ready to share. "I have something to tell you," Grace said, her voice trembling with excitement. "I'm 8 weeks pregnant." Tom's eyes widened, a mix of shock and joy flooding his face. He pulled Grace into a hug, his voice cracking as he whispered, "Another miracle." As they looked at their little family, Oliver giggling with Charlie, the promise of a new life on the way, they knew they could face whatever challenges lay ahead. Life had tested them, shaped them, and blessed them in unexpected ways. But through it all, their love had been their anchor. Together, they looked toward the future with hope, knowing that as long as they had each other, they could handle anything. Their journey had taught them invaluable lessons about resilience, love, and the unbreakable bonds of family. Every challenge they faced had only brought them closer together, deepening their appreciation for the little moments that made life beautiful. They cherished every second with Oliver, grateful for his health, his laughter, and the happiness he brought into their lives. Charlie remained a central figure in their home, his playful antics and unwavering loyalty a constant source of joy. The bond between Charlie and Oliver grew stronger with each passing day, a friendship that seemed destined to last a lifetime. Together, they explored the world around them, filling their days with wonder and laughter. With hearts full of hope and gratitude, the Millers looked to the future, ready to embrace whatever adventures awaited them. They knew that, no matter what came next, their love and resilience would carry them through. Did you enjoy this story? Do you think children and dogs make the perfect companions? Can a dog really save a life? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you liked this story, please subscribe to our channel and give this video a thumbs up. Your support helps us share more heartwarming stories like this one. Thank you so much for watching and being part of our journey. Until next time, take care and have a wonderful day.